you, Mr. Speaker. Question 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government believes that all customers should have appropriate access to banking services, and that is why we've legislated to protect access to cash. We also support the FCA's bank branch closure guidance, as well as industry initiatives to provide in-person access, including shared banking hubs and the post office, and access via digital means.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you. More than 5,000 bank branches have closed since 2015. Sadly, the Lloyds Bank in Withington Village will be joining the many more branches that are closing in the coming months. That will be Withington without a bank branch. But the industry will only have delivered 30 of those shared banking hubs by the end of this year. Does the Minister think the pace and the scale of that rollout is good enough?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for asking that question, and it's worth stating at first that, as the honourable gentleman knows, the decisions on whether to open or close a branch is a commercial one that the government does not interfere with. However, we've legislated to protect access for cash. The banks need to abide by the FCA's guidance, and the latest guidance was only published last week. And in relation to shared banking hubs, indeed, I think that we should increase the pace in which banking hubs are rolled out, and I'm talking with the industry on ways on how to do that.
Lynn Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's pretty clear that most of the legacy banks don't give a stuff about their customers and just want to screw as much money out of people as possible. After the scandal of Coots debanking Nigel Farage, the government acted swiftly to try and make that much more difficult for other customers. But many businesses are facing the same problem that Nigel Farage faced when he was debanked. What's the government going to do to stop businesses being debanked in the same way as individuals are being debanked?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I'm not sure I'd quite accept his characterisation of the banking industry, but I'm very happy to meet with him and discuss problems that he's outlined in relation to specific businesses and access to bank accounts.
As my honourable friend for Manchester Whittington just said, nearly 6,000 bank branches have closed since 2015 and only 30 banking hubs are up and fully running. This has left countless people financially excluded and affected lots of small businesses. So could I ask the Minister once again, is he going to accelerate the rollout of banking hubs properly? And why isn't his government doing anything to reverse the decline of the great British high street?
Minister.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Honourable Lady's words about Lord Darling and put that on the record, and to echo the words also of my right honourable friend, the Chancellor. In relation to bank branches, look, I'll repeat my position as follows. It is important that government does not decide when a branch opens and when it closes, but it is a concern where communities are left without appropriate access to cash. That's why we are the first government to legislate for access to cash, as we did earlier this year. And that's why I believe that we should speed up the rollout of banking hubs, and I'm working with the industry in ways on which we can do that.
Tulip City.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Minister is really serious about protecting the future of the Great British High Street, will he back Labour's pledge today, which has been welcomed by Cash Access UK and the wider sector as well, to guarantee face-to-face banking in every community and give the FCA the powers it needs to roll out hundreds of banking hubs across the country?
Minister.
Well, as the Honourable Lady knows, the industry lead the rollout of banking hubs. We are supporting, as I say again, to speed that up as much as possible. I haven't seen the Labour pledge, but I suspect I won't support it. But what I would say is that it is important that the industry hears the views of constituents and indeed members from across the House, and that we speed up the need for banking hubs in communities that need them.
Nick Drummond.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Speaker, and to all of those in the House. Question 8.
Excellent. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At Autumn's statement, we set out a series of measures to improve pension saver returns, increase opportunities for investment and boost growth into the UK's capital markets and high-growth companies.
Nick Drummond.
Thank you. The UK's pension funds lag behind their counterparts in the USA, Scandinavia and Australia in investing in technology firms. Can my honourable friend continue his work on reforms and ensure that more pension fund investment stays in the UK to boost our tech sector?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And under the industry-led Mansion House Compact, 11 of the UK's largest defined contribution pension schemes have now signed up to the objective of allocating at least 5% of their funds to unlisted equities by 2030, which we believe could unlock £50 billion for investment in high-growth companies and should help increase returns to savers.
Jim Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The greatest investment, Minister, that anyone can make, and I know the Minister appreciates that, is within ourselves, in other words, within our own country, within Northern Ireland, within all of the United Kingdom. So what steps can be taken to ensure that investment by pension schemes is carried out UK-wide in cutting-edge businesses like Wrightbus, like Talis, as two examples?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. Well, I think there are a couple of things that we need to be doing. First of all, it's to make sure that the industry abides by their commitment to the 5% target, and working with my colleague, the Exchequer Secretary, make sure that we present the right investment opportunities so that that capital can go into the UK in the right way.
Jessica Morton.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was pleased to speak at the launch of the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute's report on this subject last week alongside the FCA. It's worth saying it's an institute of which I used to be on the advisory board, Mr. Speaker. The government and the FCA will continue to work closely together to ensure consumer protections are fit for purpose, including through our upcoming reform of the Consumer Credit Act.
Mr. Speaker, a constituent who is the victim of domestic abuse and whose ex-husband fraudulently took out a loan in her name was constantly harassed by creditors as she tried to clear the debt, an experience shared by others, according to a recent report by the organisation the Minister mentions. Will Ministers discuss with the FCA legal limits on arrears communications in cases like this, like other countries have done?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question, and there are two things I'd say in relation to it. The first is, in relation to economic abuse, I pay tribute to the former Financial Secretary, now the Health Secretary, who did a lot of work in this area, and I'm committed to continuing with that, working with the Treasury to ensure that we limit where those instances, as she describes, can occur, and the government's doing a lot in that regard. But in relation more broadly to what does the regulator do in these sorts of instances, we have put in record funding, something to the tune of £93 million, on working with debt advice, working with the regulators, and I'm happy to discuss with her details on how it can help her constituents in the way that she mentions.
Rachel Hopkins.
Number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Who wants it? Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Honourable Lady knows, the path to lower interest rates is through low inflation, and the Independent Bank of England has the government's full support as it takes action to return inflation to target. The government's mortgage charter, brokered by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, earlier on this year, is available to 90% of borrowers. Real disposable income per person is around £800 higher than the OBR had expected in their March forecast.
Thank you. 1.5 million fixed-rate mortgage deals will expire next year, meaning even more people paying sky-high costs. And it comes at the same time as many people are suffering increased financial hardship and personal debt, impacting their mental and physical health. So does the Minister think that it's fair that families are paying the hundreds of pounds more each month to cover the costs of this government's mini-budget disaster?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I'd say is that in relation to mortgage costs and interest rates, which have gone up all over the world, we're around middle of the pack. If you look at, for example, they're higher than the United States, for example. But what will definitely make things harder for her constituent, and indeed constituents of all of us in this House, is borrowing an extra £28 billion that will only serve to increase inflation and keep rates higher for longer.
Dr. Therese Coffey.
Mr. Speaker, Merry Christmas to you, to the officers, clerks and staff of the House. Question 16.
Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has been one of the largest donors of the global market-led task force on nature-related financial disclosures, or TNFD, initiative. We will consider how best the TNFD's recommendations should be incorporated into policy and legislative architecture in a manner that is coherent with global sustainability reporting.
Sir Therese Coffey.
Mr. Speaker, I'm encouraged by the answer by my honourable friend. It's a year ago today that the Global Biodiversity Framework was agreed in Montreal, and it was absolutely necessary to restore biodiversity loss. Now, the TNFD initiative was actually launched by the UK G7 presidency in 2021. It featured in the Green Finance Strategy that my right honourable friend Chancellor and I both did the ministerial forward to earlier this year, and he will be aware of the recommendations that were launched in September. I'm really conscious that there's a lot of support from the Treasury previously, and that we try and accelerate the ISSB standards so that we can bring in this initiative just as successfully as we have done for TCFD.
Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for her question, and she mentions the Green Finance Strategy, which indeed was brought forward by the Treasury. It contains plans to bring forward the sustainability disclosure requirements, building on the global commitments that have been made. We've already implemented the climate-related financial disclosures. We are looking very carefully at the TNFD disclosures, and we hope to update the House in due course.
Dave Dougan.
UK capital requirement regulations mandate a 50% level of capitalisation to be held by lenders for longer terms as opposed to 20% for shorter terms. Car manufacturers such as Renault's RCI underpin every franchise car dealer across these islands and operate on a 7-day notice period to terminate in order to minimise their capital requirements at 20%. The problem arises, Mr Speaker, when a bank like RCI maladministers a serious activity report, panics over their obligations under the regulations and terminates an award-winning Renault-Nissan Dacia dealer like Mackie Motors in my constituency with 7 days' notice. Will the Chancellor or one of his ministers meet with me to discuss this crisis?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. Indeed, I will meet with him to discuss it to make sure that this regulation does not have the adverse effects that he has so far outlined.